because I didn't know it could happen. And so that's kind of how I started Providence City Community Outreach. And then 8 years and 3 days after my first son was stillborn, I had my second son, and that pregnancy was only went well because I was so intentional. I knew, I was like, I love, my family loves me and they're here, but I can't do this without a doula, without, you know, all of the support, a therapist. And so then we kind of like went into this other chapter of like, people have pregnancy after loss. And they still have to deal with this, and they're afraid, and you know, all of these things. And so I became a doula because I wanted to help people through that. And then just through the experiences of loss and being a doula and working with the families in the community, I became a maternal health advocate and sitting on different boards and coalitions, just wanting to speak up for the people that, you know, talk to me in my ear, but don't feel like they can speak out loud.
That is such a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that. Limon?
So I became what I needed. My trauma.
Unpack that.
Yes. My trauma became my superpower. And basically, so I call myself, I am a part of an elite club. I'm a Black woman that is I have experienced pregnancy, recurrent pregnancy loss, and fertility struggles. Talk about navigating doctor's appointments and the healthcare system. I'm also a therapist. I've been a therapist for over 20 years. And basically, along my journey of several losses, I had to navigate a lot of white spaces that didn't understand my story, that didn't understand who I was, what I needed, who did not read my chart and didn't ask me, you know, so how many children have you, how many living children do you have? Or how many children do you have? I tell them I am the mother of 5 angel babies. And be able to say to them proudly that you need to really read, you need to understand. Each patient is different coming into your organization. My journey started in 2017 where I got a diagnosis of infertility, and this notion of, you know, a stereotype of people of color, Black women being hyper-sexualized, hyper-commoditized, as well as hyper-fertile. You know, and knowing that my parents and aunts were teenage parents, I waited later on in life to start my own family, and here we are. This crazy journey happens, but it's a communal journey. It affects our families. You know, loss is not just, it happens to the woman. It actually happens to your partner and to your social networks. But also understanding, as I am a woman of color, I had to get permission to rest. And oftentimes we kind of push ourselves. We will rationalize 100,000 times that we're okay when we're a hot mess. Hot mess. And I became what I needed because I wanted to give women and people of color, my practice specializes in infant and pregnancy loss, and fertility, and navigating and helping families through what that feels like, those unspoken things. But also being a person of color, if you show up with a do-rag or a headscarf or whatever, I'm like, oh, you going out today? That's nice. Versus I had clients that come in to say that, you know, you're the first person that didn't ask me if I'm going through a depressive episode. You know, so understanding this, the nuances of culture and representation really matters. But becoming what I needed as a therapist is a parallel healing process that allows me to honor my children in a different way, but also understand that my pain has a purpose, and really embodying that. So I also embody that and also teach and help usher other people through that, to understand that your pain doesn't have a purpose and that your children and your experiences, we don't know what the purpose is right now, but I can guarantee you, you will get through this. And we're Black women. If the sky falls, baby, by the time you heal, can you imagine the power that you have after that? You will definitely fix that sky, paint it a whole different color, whatever, because that's what we do.
Thank you for sharing your superpower with so many. Ronnie?
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for having me here, and thank you both for sharing. I bring a slightly different perspective. So I'm a 37-year-old biracial female. So my mother's white, my father's black, and I grew up in a rural area. And so what I come from is my parents instilling these strong morals and values of you're a strong biracial woman. You know, you can identify as both races that created you, right? But then you have the stereotype of society that's like you are black, right? And so when you think about navigating the healthcare system, it's one of those things that I'm like, oh my gosh, can I lean on my white side? I know it might be better for me, you know? And so it's that struggle of identity, that racial relay you go through life with. But that grounded me in wanting to really be in the DEI space and pivot the narrative. You know, being able to go from these generational stories that have been passed down to me of fear from the black side of my family, but then hearing the celebrations from the white side and saying, you know, how can we blend these, right? And how can we make our positive experiences more well known as we're sharing our story? And so for me, I haven't had children yet. I'm in a space of fear because of the work that I do and the stats that I know. And quite honestly, being in the field and speaking to healthcare professionals and educating them, especially within implicit bias and the systemic barriers that we experience, we have a lot of work to do. And so I want to be that change maker and that person that can be in the field to help pivot that.
And such a powerful thing to bring the intersectionality into the conversation. I think that's very important, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hi. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be a part of this conversation and just to be a black woman, right? I think that's been something that we know how to celebrate it, but we also know the struggles that go with it. So I come from a perspective of really wanting to tell my story because I believe that the unconscious bias that we experience when we talk about maternal or black maternal health is beyond what resources you have. And so I come from a space of being fortunate, blessed, honored, and still going. We'll see how these markets turn out, of having a 22-year career on Wall Street and leading a global business for a top firm and having resources. And the juxtaposition and struggles of during my own pregnancy, sort of the expectation that, oh no, your journey's going to be different because of your resources, because of your access, because of connections that you can sort of lean on. And I'm here to say that that is just not the case. And so when we talk about the resources, it's certainly important, but I think it's so much more than that. When we talk about the struggles of maternal black health. And so my simple quick story is, I waited also later in life to have kids, thought let me get my career going, make sure everything's locked up, let me make sure this dude I'm with for 20 years is who I really want to do this with, right? Because then there's connections forever, and he's good for now, y'all. He's good for now. But really, it was a pregnancy that seemed fine. And prior to that, I actually had an ectopic pregnancy, and that's something I'd love to delve into a little more too, because I think when you talk about the risk of fatality amongst black women, there is something really real there in terms of lack of information, lack of awareness of how critical ectopic pregnancies can be and how dangerous they can be. And I think there's a lot in the healthcare system that can be changed in terms of awareness around that. So had an ectopic pregnancy, then did have a successful pregnancy that seemed to be going just fine until it turned. And then found myself, on a trading floor, water breaking, and having a journey that led me to having a 27.5-week-old baby, and then going through really the 90-day experience within the healthcare system as a Black woman, and just really wanting to be seen as human in the journey. And so, you know, things turned out okay, but I think there was a lot that had to happen for that to happen. And I do think that it just really personally connected me to, at the end of the day, that there's just such systemic inequities in the system that are beyond leaps and bounds. You know, and ascend resources that just have to be changed and talked about. And so that's what connects me to this story and to this picture. And it's actually what brought me to Your Room to Grow, you know, over a decade ago, of which I champion and hold it close because, you know, there's levels of work we're doing that are certainly important. But I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, I think this is a really great place to start. Thank you each for sharing your personal stories. I know you'd probably be doing amazing work anyway, but it's also nice to know what personally motivates you to make things better for other Black women specifically. This week, the White House issued a proclamation for Black maternal health saying, quote, it's an urgent call to action. So Stephanie, the CDC reported that maternal death rates rose in general in 2021, but especially for Black women, who are now up to 3 times more likely to die during childbirth than white women. It's a sobering statistic for sure. Why do you think we've seen the increase in general and then specifically for Black women?
Yeah, I think I would say safety, you know, is an issue, feeling safe in to be able to have the pregnancy and the journey that you want. You have this vision, you know, as a doula, you work with people on a birth plan. And I recently worked with a family who was not a family of color, and they had experienced a loss, and so they were like, let's call it preferences because, you know, I don't know about this plan. So in general, it's just this idea that like you can have a plan in your head, you can put it on paper and you can put it in a frame if you want to, but you know, is it gonna go the way you want? Because are you going to interact with a medical professional that's going to allow you to use your voice and to say what you want? Are they going to rush you through? What's the timeline looking like? Who has a vacation coming up? You know, in general. And then I think for Black women, I think there's just a bias around our care. You know, there are actual medical professionals that think that we can take pain better than anyone else. You know, and so saying, I'm feeling this pain, this hurts. Well, you know, you're just anxious. It's all right. Like, you know, and I think that those kinds of things are the issue because we know our bodies. Everyone knows their body, right? It's not, you know, but you know your body and you're speaking up. You know, I remember being pregnant with my first son and waiting all day and doing this. You know, going to the bathroom like, but I didn't want to call because, you know, you feel like, oh, they're going to think I'm crazy. Like, you know, they're going to think, oh, just forget it, you know. Calling and saying, I've been waiting all day. I know that something is not right. You know, well, you know, have some juice. I had a whole bowl of ice cream. Have another bowl and call me back. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm in my house freaking out because I know something is wrong. And I think that that's often the problem. And then, you know, there is literally, you know, we were just talking about this at another conference, but like this idea of like white coat syndrome where you can be the most outgoing person and have the biggest voice, but you get in front of certain people and you're like, they know more than me, just be quiet, I'm not saying anything. And they don't look like me and they're gonna judge me. And I think that that's a problem. I think another issue that comes up is that people are not just dying in birth, although they are. People are not just dying in birth, they're dying after birth. You know, they're dying when they go home and they call and say, I'm short of breath. They're also dying from depression. We don't have to talk about this, but, and you know, you may speak on it, but we're also at a high risk for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders that are untreated. You know, so not just that we have them, but they're untreated. And there's studies on this, and so it's like, aside from that, we also have to deal with after birth, the stress, the lack of community, the lack of understanding and awareness, and then this mental issue that's going on with us, and not being able, we already can't speak up. And so then that just, it spirals. And so I think that there's so many things, but, you know.
Yeah, you mentioned the implicit bias, which is, of course, just the big one. Can you guys think of any other contributing factors to why Black maternal health seems to be so much worse than other groups? Are there any other contributing factors?
I think there's also a lack of training in general. You know, as a social worker, I can get a certificate in trauma and this type of neighborhood or whatever, but I can't get a certificate in my training as a mental health professional in this type of atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, people are starting to do more programs. For example, you know, there's a Latino-based program, you know, in mental health. There's a Black, you know, where they're starting to, you know, niche a little bit, but this has not yet reached the niche section, even though we're dying, and which is not okay. I think there's also a lack of training on part of the medical professionals, and having people like Stephanie come in to say, this is what you don't do. This is what you, please don't do this. For example, I remember when I lost one of my children, I was in the same section in the GYN department, and the walls are thin, so I heard another child's heartbeat from another appointment. You know, can you put me in the back? Please put me in the back. You know, it's like being in the room, understanding. You don't have to, don't ask me when was your last period. I hate my period. You know, like all of these things they're so triggering. So I think there's such a lack of understanding of people. You know, this is not how you treat people, you know, in general. And then we start from there, and then you can understand the certain nuances. Let me tell my story, but also read my chart. Do your job first, but then let me allow me to tell you what I need, but also fill in those gaps for the things I'm not saying. But if there's a lack of training on that part, then you're going to be treated as if you're any other patient, and I'm not. I'm coming in hot and with trauma.
Yeah.
So treat me as such.
Definitely. I kind of want to piggyback off of that, because I think that really brings it back to the systems level.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, just based off what both of you said, if you even think about how our healthcare professionals of today being trained and educated, it's rooted back all the way to the education.
Come on.
And so when you look at, you know, you were mentioning earlier, like Black women feel less pain, etc.
Absolutely.
Like that was an 1850s publication, and it's perpetuated for hundreds of years.
Yes.
But then you also think about, in 2017, a nursing textbook was recalled because it had a page in there about here's how the different races and ethnicities feel pain. Like what? So it's, you know, there is life outside of your bubble, and to one respect, we have healthcare professionals that don't know what they don't know. But then at the same time, whose job is it to change that narrative? And so we have to take a deeper look. How are we educating folks, you know, but not just at a, you know, a professional training level, but dig back.
Yes.
Go earlier.
I agree.
You know, but then also on an individual level, what are you doing to learn about the perspectives outside of your bubble? You know, there's so many times I've worked with healthcare professionals, and I ask them, you know, have you ever experienced a community that you are serving? And so many are like, oh, I commute in, I commute out. I'm like, okay, well, there's a problem right there. If you don't know who you're serving, what they're experiencing, do you know the food security? Do you know the housing security? Like, what is that community experiencing to help you better care for those that you're, you know, and it's one of those things that's like, oh, I never thought of it because I never had to think about it. And so, yeah, I just had to.
Something like transportation.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
That may keep somebody from getting to a hospital. You don't think about that if you've always had a car.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
I also wanted to point out the CDC says about 80% of the maternal death causes are preventable. You know, there are things like mental health, hemorrhaging, cardiac issues, infection, things that if people are properly trained or listening to their patients, they can catch, right? So I just wanted to, a lot of this is preventable if we pay the right attention to and listen to the Black patients.
Absolutely.
Another contributing factor to poor maternal health is the reality that Black mothers are likely to receive late or no prenatal care. So Rash, I want to come to you. Can you talk to me about your experience and in the system and getting care and how that was for you?
Yeah. Wow, let's see where to start. I think I come to it from a place of, at the end of the day, we need to make a continued push for representation within the healthcare system, right? We need healthcare providers to also get tired of the statistics that we see. And they should do that because they take an oath, right, to service, to the best of their abilities and care for humans, all people. And I think, my journey certainly, I was fortunate to have a really, really good OBGYN who actually allowed me to shake up the system a little bit. And I think that's a hard thing to really sort of ask because there's reputational impacts to that. And I think a lot of healthcare professionals are always worried about malpractice and, things of that sort, which is a whole nother issue that should be addressed that I think is highly related to this issue. But even in giving that access, there were, points and types of doctors that I found were not respectful of me trying to understand my rights in making decisions, because I was sort of challenged in a way, had to make pretty tough decisions and quickly. It was, I went into the hospital. I had my daughter at 27 and a half weeks, but I went into the hospital when my water broke at 25 and a half. And so it was a on the cusp decision of, proceed or don't proceed. And I think in that, I was given, certainly advice around what that meant. But I think we also have to be careful and know that advice can be jaded in some ways, right? Because hospitals are often trying to protect themselves. And so the needing to have the right, I didn't know what questions to ask, and I'm a pretty informed person, but finding that out quickly and then asking those questions and being told to know, show me the numbers before you make my decision for me if I'm going to continue on with this pregnancy, and tell me what the risks are, which is your obligation, so I appreciate that. But I need a next level down. Like, I need you to show me the probabilities and the numbers. And I think a lot of times we don't know we can ask for those things. And even when you ask for them, you get looks like, well, who are you? Do you have a medical degree? And, my answer was, I have plenty of other degrees. I don't have a medical degree, but I have a baby in me, and you don't, right? And so this is what we're going to do, because I need to understand and assess the situation for me, right? Not just fully accept what you put on the table to me. And so in that, I think also when we talk about just training and bedside manners, whether it be cultural or not, but, I found even being, coming from the place I was coming from with resources, et cetera, being talked at, right? And how you're not going to talk at me, when it comes to me. And so there's a whole lot, I think, that's wrapped up in that. But I will say that, when you have the ability and someone gives you the ability to, challenge the system, you start to find that there are actually a little bit of advocacy. We need a whole lot more in the system. And I found comfort in, getting to a variety of types of doctors when I was going through my experience, including high-risk doctors, of which I made demands for a high-risk doctor that was of color. Because I felt that I just needed to have that perspective and that lens. And there's not a lot of them. We need more of them. But I was fortunate enough to be in a hospital that had them, and they shed a whole new light on sort of my situation that allowed me to make decisions that, I was told by the hospital were the wrong decisions. But they were right for me, and I had to look through them trying to cover themselves and think about what was best for myself, my health, my family, and my child, ultimately. So,
Your story is powerful, and it even makes me think of what do women do in rural communities,
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
where we have more hospitals closing, and there's even fewer doctors and physicians of color accessible to them to maybe have that comfort or have that dialogue. Do you, the rest of you, have any stories of women having issues accessing care, or why you think it's harder for them to get prenatal care or care throughout their pregnancies?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
And I did also want to say that I do have a program called Support Through Loss. And we provide paid leave after a pregnancy loss. So
Yep.
I hope you'll
That's
follow
awesome.
that as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just any other stories about that you've heard or experienced of women having issues accessing care, prenatal or otherwise?
Yeah, I think that, especially with March Dimes, we put out the Maternity Care Desert Report last fall, and we're releasing our state reports this year as well to get to that more granular level. But there's so many times that we have heard the stories of various birthing individuals just saying, it took me 6 hours to find an OBGYN. It took me, attempts at transportation that did not exist in these rural communities to try to access some kind of care. And I think that one of the things I hear so often, especially with growing up in a rural community, is the fact that people lean on their families.
Yeah.
And this is why like the doula support comes in heavily, midwifery comes in heavily as well, is because you lean on what you know.
Yeah.
And because you don't always have those professional services to further support you. So it's devastating.
I'm like, as you were talking, I'm like, yep, experience that, experience that, experience that. And I'm like, man, it's so crazy that, the stories are the same. No matter where you live, how you live, whatever, what walk of life, the stories are the same. And it's so saddening, because we deserve better.
Yeah.
We deserve better. And there's such a lack of distrust for the healthcare system in general. I mean, I can't get some of my aunts to go to the doctor just for a common cold, let alone this particular part. And when you're talking about leaning into family support, it's like, oh, you just having a baby, that's it. It is like, oh, no, but we've seen the statistics. No, grandma is different. It's a little bit different. Auntie is a little bit different. Because we have more information,
Yes.
for better or for worse,
Yep.
versus this is, we're overeducated and wanted to advocate for ourselves in comparison to, like the doctor has all of the information and they're the keepers, so I have to follow their direction when that is no longer the case.
We have so much more information now, especially about things like postpartum depression.
Yeah.
And we do know now that postpartum depression affects approximately 10 to 20% of women who give birth. Ronnie, I want to come to you first. Given the challenges we've just talked about with Black women and access to healthcare, how do we sort of increase parity in mental health access during pregnancy and after?
Yeah, great question. And it's multifactorial. And I think that we have to remember that, because there's not just one solution.
Yeah.
I'll take it to piggyback off of something I stated earlier, and we piggybacked off of training and the fact that we need to do a better job of screening, because as she mentioned earlier, they don't even ask the questions.
No.
But then even when you have the tools to actually conduct the training or the screening, how are the tools produced?
Yeah.
And so if we have biased tools, what does that do for us?
Absolutely.
And so I think we need to take it back to our foundations and talk about systemically what can we do to help improve our screening tools, have the most objective tools possible with the diagnoses as well, but then also with the treatment. I know with the recent CDC release, they were stating how the rates of postpartum depressive symptoms were 60% higher in Black women than white. And so we think of what resources do they have? If they're in rural communities, and we know that from studies, places that are more racially segregated, there's a higher concentration of these postpartum events as well. We know that bias, I think all of us have mentioned, you know, having to get more training, even at the professional level, because they've already had all the training to get there. So now, what can we do while we're in this space that can help to really reduce the barriers that folks are seeing? Creating that open space and helping people center before they enter a room, from both the professional side, but then also the patient side, to come in understanding of, one, it's okay to advocate for ourselves, but two, is the professional side, let's give them space to advocate. I think having that blend can help in those instances, and seeing folks that look like you, having the representation. So it's very multifactorial. We need legislation, especially helping with insurance support in this case, or Medicaid extension as well, to really help to support the different intricacies that one may go through when they're experiencing this.
Culturally, what do you guys think we need to do to address the mental health and postpartum conditions with Black women and birthing people? Because there's a cultural component there as well, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it really comes down to understanding also that depression manifests differently in us. It's not, we don't always show the clinical signs that were created by older white men. It's manifested in our bodies. It's the tension headaches, the lack of sleep, the undereating, the overeating. What I'm also seeing is a lot more people pleasing, because we're trying to compensate and make ourselves feel better. So we're people pleasing or overworking, you know, because we know that we're good at this. You know, it is irritability. It's because we can't say the word sad, unfortunately, because that's seen as weakness. We can't say that. We can't embody it. We can't show it because we are superwoman. That we are, but we're still human, you know, and understanding that. So understanding culturally that it looks different from person to person within the Black community. And it also an understanding that postpartum doesn't stop with the first baby. So if you've had multiple babies and you didn't get treatment for the first one, trickle down effect, you know. So understanding and asking those questions of holistically looking at the person, and asking how long this has been happening, because that can be their sign of also depression.
Yeah, I think on the flip side too, the stigmatization of, I don't want a label placed on me by sharing what's really going on with
Absolutely.
me.
Right.
Absolutely.
I think especially that's something that I know my close friends are experiencing at times, where they're just like, I don't want people to think I'm crazy. You know, is it normal to feel this way? And creating that sense of normalcy around the fact that this can affect what you were saying, every individual differently. It doesn't say that you're any less of a person, or that you deserve any less, or you're worth any less. And I think that stigma of what is that going to make me come across as is something that's a hard battle for many to fight.
You're a doula. I'm sure this is a topic that you
I was
are
about to say, let me tell you
deeply
about
familiar
Stephanie.
with.
Let me tell you about Stephanie.
So what conversations are you having with patients, or what do you see as a way that we can improve support for Black women struggling with postpartum?
Yeah, I think one of the things is to understand where Black women, where their villages are, where they're getting their support, what's the social support, what does that social support network look like? And so oftentimes, I know one of the things is like there was a big push in the community around like, get help, get support, therapy is good. And people caught on to that and said, okay, fine. Like, because people were saying, I don't want to look crazy. My mom said, don't talk about my business. And now people are, not my mom, honey. My mom's good.
Her mom's good.
Not my mom. My mom is good. But, you know, but it's a cultural thing at times that we do not talk about what happens in our house. And people were stepping up and saying, I'll do that. And I know from my organization, when there's people reaching out like, okay, I'm ready for therapy. And we don't have the people to service them. We don't have the people that take their insurance. We don't have the people that look like them, what they're requesting. Like, people are waiting in line for therapy. That's one thing. I think and the other thing is that some people are like, I go to church, I talk to my family, I'm a part of this organization already. You got me with, you know, even organizations like that we stigmatize, but like DCF and, you know, these programs that are around us. Let's put people in there that can help. Let's equip the people that are already in there, build the workforce in that way, you know. And Lamona and I know each other for new reasons now, but because like our organization, like I said, we have people sitting in our programs that we're working with that are looking for support. And so I'm not a therapist. I'm doing all I can to get the trainings, like you said, you know, but then you call on people and you say, hey, can you come in? Can you talk? Because
Absolutely.
and other people, other organizations and places can do that. And I think that there's so many organizations and places already working with people.
Absolutely,
And people don't want to keep adding onto the list of practitioners working with them, because then you have to tell this traumatic story or whatever story 100 times, you know. And so I think that equipping, finding out, talking to the people and saying like, who are you working with, what are you doing, and then I think the last thing is like, as a person of color, as a woman of color, when I'm going through something, I'm understanding, I'm healing, I'm figuring out what works for me, that doesn't rub off. You have to like work and help people and invite them into the space to say, here's my journey. And I think we have to do that more, is be more transparent about our journeys and transparent about our healing and sharing those different ways that we are, like, you know, oh, I worked with this therapist, or I did this, or I'm a part of this program. Like, you know, we have to do more of that talking. And
I agree, more talking.
I think also we have to, you know, give ourselves some grace, right? I tried to, when I was going through mine, and once we came out of it, after spending, you know, 90 days in the NICU and just figuring out, you know, life, death, what was happening, like what human being was I going to wind up with in terms of, you know, just, you know, having a baby, the normal dream that you think of having a baby. And I think sometime on the postpartum front, we forget that in addition to, it is certainly emotional, but it's also chemical. Like, we have to give ourselves grace to understand that our bodies just went through a massive chemical overhaul and change, right? In terms of the act of being pregnant. And so with that comes other things. It's certainly postpartum depression is its own thing, and it's not akin to anything else, but I just think about if you catch a virus or a cold, something that we treat it, and we don't feel so bad about that. It just happened, right? And I think we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace on that front too, and just say, well, there's a lot that's happened here in my body that is out of my control. And then on top of that, the emotional ness of it and the circumstances that you might be going through. And so it is something we should certainly recognize, accept, and I think we have to also have, as everyone has said, the resources and the space to feel like it's okay, right, to have it, because it's not something we did to ourselves, right? It's a part of the process in some ways, often. And I do think it's unspoken more than it should be. But I think we also we also have to remember that it's not a black thing, right? All women in some ways may struggle or have the potential to struggle with postpartum depression. And so I think there just needs to be a huge disarming of what it is, as well as the education and the resources and the space to handle it in our own ways, but also to know that, seeking treatment is not something that is bad. It's addressing sometimes just the natural imbalances that might result in the body as a result of what you just went through.
The education
that's
is
okay.
huge.
Yeah,
The education is so important, because if you don't know that 1 in 5 women struggle with some sort of postpartum depression, anxiety, or substance abuse, disorder, you might think it's just you.
Right.
But once you're armed with those statistics, I hope you would be more likely to engage with your community and know that asking for help isn't a weakness, right?
Right.
But it starts with that education and just knowing.
Yeah.
So you're right, give yourself some grace, and but it's tough.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
not less than because you need support.
Yeah.
Support looks different at every journey in your life. So redefining what the word support means to you at each stage of the journey is going to be very important.
I love that fluidity, right?
Yes.
It doesn't always have to look one way.
No, it does not.
Yeah. You know, we talked about postpartum, but also early pregnancy loss is something that has a huge impact on mental health. And a quarter of women are at increased risk of major depression 30 days after treatment. So Lamone, I want to come to you, and that's compared to other racial groups. As an advocate for and counselor for families dealing with early pregnancy loss or pregnancy loss in general, why do you think it's impacting Black women at a higher rate? And what are some things we need to just be aware of in that conversation?
It comes back to something that I said earlier. It looks different from each person from person to person, and everyone kind of touched on it as far as like your body is crashing. It's a holistic type of way of looking at your body and looking at your experience. But infant and pregnancy loss is unfortunately a thing for us, and it happens so often that, like you talked about a little bit earlier, is like it's almost like a rite of passage. You know, understanding, like, remember when I told my grandma that I had fibroids, and it's like, oh my God, she's like, oh yeah, you welcome to the club. Oh no, this I don't want this.
I want to be in this club.
Please revoke my ticket immediately, please, and thank you. I think it just comes down because we don't want to look like we're, quote, weak. You know, we don't want to look like we're just having a baby. You know, the word is we're just having a baby. Excuse me, I'm responsible for creating something, you know, and then I have to take care of it for many years after. And it's this stigma that we have to carry the weight of the world on our own. And, you know, I've had the privilege of wonderful biological and non-biological family, my chosen family, that really stepped up in my own time of need because I didn't have it. And I had to be convinced to sit down, to take a break. I'm a helping professional. I was gonna go to work on Monday, you know, and we've been there, we've done that, you know, you know, but I'm at, you know, loss 5 now. Like I have gotten beat up by life. And we often are beat up by life in general. So the postpartum depression might actually just be an exacerbation of what's already there, you know, unfortunately, because that is just, after experiencing that loss, your entire world shifts. You know, the moment that you find out that you're pregnant, for example, your world starts to shift. You start planning 401ks, you know, like you moving over money, like I gotta rebudget, that Discover bill gotta go down. You know, like your whole life shifts. And then when you're asked to pick up the pieces of your what's now shattered life, you're asked to be a grown-up in a situation that you've never experienced. You know, and that is a most jarring thing, because as a Black woman, we always have it together. In all spaces that we have to enter, we have to always be on point 50, 100 times more than other races. And having postpartum, or saying the word postpartum, or experiencing that, that's your moment where you're like, oh, wait a minute, I am human, but I have to be convinced that I'm human. I have to be convinced, and I'm so appreciative of my chosen families because they helped me through the postpartum, but also having other people. There was a fertility nurse, there was a radiologist. The Black women that were a part of my fertility journey, they made the difference for me. When I got my diagnosis, I had a radiologist sitting next to me, the radiologist, and she's like, baby, it's gonna be okay. Black woman. I'm like, you don't even know me, but I love you. You know, we need to be loved on in a different way. You know, we need a hug, and that's what I was looking for. You know, this is before, you know, everything was virtual. I needed a hug, like a physical hug, to let me know that you don't have to have it all together. You don't have to have all of the answers. You don't have to do any of these pieces. Just get up in the morning, baby.
Yeah.
Just get up in the morning, you know. So I think having that notion where there's other Black women that can give you permission to not be okay is so powerful. So finding more people like myself that's a cheerleader, like, you ain't gotta get it together, but you brush your hair today. Good job. You know, you brush, what? Oh, that's a new hairstyle? You put your hair in a ponytail? Yes, you are winning today. We need that.
Yeah. I also want to point out something I've learned in recent years after a friend dealt with pregnancy loss is that doulas help with aftercare, which I think is something that is so important because a lot of women don't know what to do, but doulas are certified to help you to navigate that loss.
We love you.
I think doulas, sometimes people will come not knowing what a doula is. I've had someone come to me in a meeting and say, yeah, I think I want to have a home birth, so I'm going to ask you, I want you to work with me. And I'm like, do you have a midwife? And they're like, no, I just want to do it. No, wait. So we're not medical professionals, although we can have many different certifications and trainings. But one of the main reasons that we're around is for like that emotional support, that like, you know, being able to like say, look at me right here,
Yes.
forget about that.
Child.
And I think I think with the loss, it's similar, you know, being able to remind you that you don't have to do it all. Being able to say, all right, who's the team? Because a lot of that stuff we do in the beginning anyway is like, who's your team? I know you're thinking about like, what you're gonna pack in the bag, and that's great, but when you get home, what's gonna happen? And that doesn't always mean when you get home with the baby. Sometimes it means when you get home after. And I've been with people, and I've had to say, I've been with a birthing person, a mom, you know, and said, hey, go home and get all that stuff out of the house. You know what I mean? And to the person who else is with them, because you have to have a level-headed person with you to be able to, like, you know, triage the next step of life. And as we say, you know, with Proper City, helping you re-enter back into life. And so doulas definitely help with that and support in that way of just like, you know, taking out the other things and like giving you like a focus and just sometimes lighting the path, being right in front of you. Okay, take this step. Now take this step. It's okay, take this step, you know? So.
What a beautiful responsibility, you know? That is heavy, but I can't imagine a more important role for somebody dealing with loss in that way.
Can I expound on that a little bit? I think it's also about understanding that there are full spectrum doulas to help you at every step of your family building journey. There's fertility doulas, there's adoption doulas, there's bereavement doulas. If I was Oprah, you get a doula, you get a doula, you get a doula. Because there is such power with having a person of support, because we don't always have that biological thing, you know, and having a person like Stephanie and other people, I mean, to me, I get emotional because I realize, you know, on my own fertility journey, but also with my clients, it's just like, you just don't have the support, you know, and it's not okay that you can't call someone to say, I'm scared, you know, so I love you all.
We're running low on time, but I do want to get to this part of the conversation about infant mortality since we just talked about pregnancy loss. And I was surprised to learn that Black infants have 2.4 times the infant mortality rate as white infants. I know with March of Dimes, you guys are really focused on the early stages. So just what do you think are some of the contributing factors to that statistic?
One of the biggest things I'll say is quality access to care. We spoke on the maternity care deserts earlier, and we find that over 60% of Black women are experiencing the loss. And they're living in these areas with limited or no access to quality care. And so you have to have that understanding. I know we talked about that prenatal support, and it doesn't matter about your education. It doesn't matter about the support of your family, but if you don't have those professional services that you're able to lean on, that you're able to gain insight into your care or to detect something that may be going wrong early on, the outcomes are not going to be as positive. And, you know, the statistics are just devastating.
Yeah.
And, you know, as we work to look at what's been happening over the past few years, especially with the hospital closures, with recent legislative decisions, and providers leaving the locales that they're at because they feel more secure in other locations. You know, those types of things are just creating even more disparity that we see. But then we also have the weathering effects that individuals are experiencing because they have this chronic stress of being Black in America.
Yeah.
And so that also heightens cardiac events, which can lead to preterm birth, which can lead to SIDS. There's so many factors that are this domino effect that occur. And so we really just need to do our part in hitting the ground, reducing those barriers, and breaking that narrative of there isn't any.
Yeah. I mean, I think here, this is where, I mean, Congressman said it earlier, this is where policy matters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Because it's so systemic,
Yeah.
and it defies really sort of the odds. And so this is where, like, this is not on us. Yeah. You know, like, as soon as, one of the things I often, it's a pet peeve of mine, you know, when there is infant mortality, a lot of times, and I do feel like it's looked at a little bit more when it happens in Black families and with Black women. It's like, well, what did you do wrong? And it's like, no, right? Like, you know, what? No, this is systematic. It's and yes, there's certain situations and special cases in terms of, you know, health journeys and genetics, et cetera. But by and large, this is a systematic issue that I think has to be taken off of us and put back to our policymakers, right? Around exactly that.
Yeah.
Like, there should be mandates around certain level of health care that is required in all districts, and certain level of care that's particularly required in districts of color and you know, particularly you know, all economic levels, but in particular low income. There should be mandates, right? You know, I always say it's interesting to me how, you know, the government will mandate certain things, you know, whether it be, you know, military age, you know, in terms of drafts, et cetera, but they don't mandate certain basic liberties and things that are required to really live a healthy and full life. And so I do think it has to be very particular, it has to become localized, and there needs to be, this issue has to be broken down and really sort of come at it from a policy perspective. And there should be mandates. And it should address all, you know, mothers, but particularly those of color, given just the disparities of numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you talk about the system, insurance, when I'm talking to healthcare professionals, they're just like, well, we have 15 minutes per visit. And I'm like, wait, what?
15 minutes.
So even when you do have access to the quality care in front of you, but know that there are time constraints that an insurer puts on a professional, when the professional does want to be there to help you. And so there, you know, the policies, the procedures, what are we doing within our organizations, within our insurer bodies to help create that space of quality care that's true quality of care.
Can I just add, sorry, voice again, and I will just leave it here, is that a lot of times when there's a loss, you hear a mother saying, I was just there a week ago. I was just there the day before. I just went in. And they still have this outcome. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are going to open up for questions, so get them percolating in your brain. I just want to kind of end on a higher note. We have talked about these statistics, which are a downer. I mean, there's no way around it. It's a crisis mode. We need to do something. That's why I was so super encouraged when I found out about Room to Grow, because I was like, oh, okay. They meet with these families, the mothers, the birthing people for 3 years quarterly and provide support from housing to education. I mean, yes, more of that. So that's why I'm here today, is because I think the mission is so crucial and important. So I would love for each of you to like highlight an organization or a program or a person who's out there doing really meaningful work that you'd like to elevate?
I'm like, I will elevate because I was just there. We just had the Black Maternal Health Conference, and so Dr. Ayo and her team, they just opened up the Black Maternal Health Lab. I'm going to say it wrong, but please look it up at Tufts. And so they're doing like really important work in partnering with the other people, the elected officials, and and bringing them in. So working on advocacy, research, and pulling it all together, and then as well bringing up the I don't want to say the young ones, I feel old, but like the people, the undergrads, the youth, but bringing them up in this, and they get to learn and they get to research and make this a part of their work and advocate as well. So I would highlight them.
Yeah. I would highlight Necka Hall and Danita Blaylock Hudson, two very powerful doulas who is doing some amazing work. In addition to Stephanie, I don't know if you saw me pointing to you. Just check it. Because I think they're doing some great work in expanding the definition again of what support looks like, and willing to go out into the community to help train and also train the people who are mothers to be doulas, so it carries on that level of support and the narrative of support. Those are the 2, 3, and every life that you touch, because I think from your program there's also other people who became what they needed as well. So those 3 wonderful, powerful doulas.
Well, I feel like I have like a selfish plug being with March of Dimes.
Well, I'm next. I'm next.
No, but definitely March of Dimes is definitely a huge resource nationally for folks. So if you are just in the space of the unknown, or if you are faced with a situation, you haven't started your journey yet, or you're in the middle of it, go to marchofdimes.org. It definitely has plenty of resources along the entire journey. I know we specialize in the NICU as well. Yes. So many resources in that space as well. But then also the local level. So you're able to search your location to find out what you have locally. So we have many partners locally, regionally, nationally, that can really help to bring the care to you in the way that you may need it, and expansion of telehealth, our mobile health units, and more. So we're really just doing whatever we can to make it happen and create more access points.
I mean, I'm a board member, so. Room to grow, I haven't heard. No, I mean, listen, the work that we are doing at Room to Grow, and really being championed by, certainly we have, our wonderful CEO and our EDs here, but the social workers at the local level that are actually having the conversation with the families and giving the guidance, as well as hearing how that guidance needs to be customized for particular families, because they're living and breathing and they're in those communities. And they know even some of the doctors and the institutions and the pitfalls. So I would implore you to go to Room to Grow and tap us, because there's just a lot of work that's been, that is happening, that needs to be happening. And then I would also say, I found also within church, there are many pastors that are out there vocally working, doing this work, and working to do it in the local communities and at the Congress level, as well as at the Senate level. And so figure out ways that you can partner, with them to sort of, and female pastors as well that are pushing that advocacy. And I think they also are a great resource for doulas and for recommendations of the local resources within the area. But I found that that's a place you can go that just feels good all the time, and they often are helpful. But Room to Grow first, church second, but Jesus first. always, Christ always won.
I want to turn to the audience. Does anybody have a question for any of our panelists before we leave? Raise your hands. Like, we're going to have to take one or two. Come on, guys.
Right there. All right. What's that? Hi. My question is, what does shaking up the system look like? I know Ms. Reed gave the example of asking her OBGYN questions and about the risk associated with medical procedures like medical decisions. So what does shaking up the system look like?
Well, I'd love to hear from these experts, but I think what we have to realize too, it starts with you, right? Because sometimes and listen, we said we know we need the policy, right? So it starts at that level, but it also starts with just the little things you can do. And so for me, that is just almost disarming the stereotypes that they think they're going to see from us.
Yeah.
Right? So again, I even experienced it going in. I got in, you know, my water broke. I'm 25 and a half weeks and I wheel in. And by the way, I just want to say I had an amazing institution, hospitals, doctors, care, et cetera. But I wheel in and my husband's like, yeah, her water broke. I don't think that's supposed to happen. Right? And they're like, yeah, have a seat.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, 25 and a half weeks. And they're like, oh. Okay, I'm like, no, there's no time for right?
Yeah.
And so my point is pushing them to be urgent and understanding that, but doing it without, I think what they expected from me was to be dramatic, right? Because we get that, oh, here they come, you know, she's dramatic, right? And I was calm in that chair with the water leaking out. And just saying, no, I think you're misunderstanding.
Persistence.
You know, I'm 25 and a half weeks. I know I am just past the point of what is defined as life. This baby, because it is a baby in my mind, but we all have the right to judge how we want to call it at that point, has no lungs, has no brain development, right? I need help now. And I was just as cool as calm. Right? So I think we can challenge in different ways. We can challenge by not giving them the awful stereotype that they all put on us. And by the way, if you need to be dramatic in that moment, do it too. But I'm just saying, like, ways to switch it up a bit, such that they understanding that you're coming from a place of this is urgent. This is a medical crisis, right? That needs to be addressed. So I think those are ways. You know, flipping the stereotype on the head. And then I think just also asking a ton of questions. And when you're not getting responses or feeling like you're being dismissed, I still have a question. It's not addressed yet. Is there someone else I can talk to? Because you seem not to be willing to really address the root of my question. And being persistent about the fact that you have the right to health care and to ask questions. And demand information back. And again, doing it in a way that's rooted in, you know, just like, these are facts. This is not, you know, this is just facts. Because I'm a human here, right? I'm a Black woman for sure, but I'm a human. And I think these are just the little things we can do while we, you know, at higher levels work towards systematic change and policy change. And then I would just say, get involved with a lot of these organizations and let your voice be spoken there and start to figure out, you know, how you can just amplify sort of the risks that are out there or just little ways. But I often like to think as a human, I got to start small, right? Because then otherwise it's too much. And so the little things, and then you take it to the bigger scales and working with, you know, your local policymakers and governments, et cetera. But I like to flip the stereotype on their head a little bit to make them really just listen.
You guys have any other tips to shake it up? Shake it up?
So
Go for it.
No, but you know, this is not just a woman or birthing individual's issue. So I think if we truly want to shake it up, let's get our youth involved in the conversation. Let's get our men involved in the conversation, you know, and all folks that identify in various methods. Like, every voice counts in this effort. I know with March for Dimes, we have our grassroots advocacy. So I definitely recommend, you know, go onto our site, check it out, become one of our grassroots advocates. You know, it tells you how to go about that conversation. It tells you who to approach about that conversation. And like she said, we all can do our part, but it does not have to be on the onus of a woman, a black woman, a black birthing person. It's all of our problem. We all were babies once.
Yes.
We all came from someone.
Yeah.
It's us. We need to talk about how can we produce a better population.
And I think for us that have stories, not being afraid to take it to the next generation.
Yep.
So my daughter, for example, fully knows her birth journey.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And there were moments even with my family, they were like, no, don't tell her that. You don't need to know all that.
You're like, yes, you
Let
do.
it, keep it to, we don't want her to think she was different.
Like
You
it's
know,
shameful or
like,
something.
and then as Akila knows, she's quite active in Room to Grow, but I decided, I did that for a minute, and then I broke that mold, because I'm like, who better to be the advocate than her?
Right.
Right? And to let her be rooted in it and accepting of it and boldly wearing it with pride. That she came through this journey and still persevered, right? And so I think even letting our children know our story and let them somehow, in appropriate ways, be a vehicle is a really important thing.
Yep.
And I would also add, don't be afraid to slow things down for you.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to pause, even if they want you to keep going, keep going, keep going, or you need this treatment. You didn't. This is my body. Chill the hell out. I need a moment.
You need a moment.
I need a moment just to regain my sanity just for a minute. Because while the physical part of me is going through this process of becoming a parent, the mental part of me is still trying to catch up to the first loss or anything else, and then get a doula. You know how I feel about doula. Because they
Go get that doula.
hello,
That's how she feels.
hello. And that's just because they can help you speak. They can understand, they understand what the heck is happening around you, so they can interpret it, feed it back to you, and then help you advocate. So that way you're not having to does this mean? What does this number mean? So having another person to be someone that can be that second person, your second in command, so to speak, on your journey.
I think too, supporting Congresswoman Presley seems like a good place to start too. She mentioned several different legislation things she's trying to do. I'm sure she needs help in getting the word out and making people aware of that. So I think that's also a good place to start. Do we have any other questions?
That's a good question.
I just want to know, when they had the judge that was on TV and daughter-in-law went into the hospital and she lost her life giving birth to a baby, what happened? Because she was Judge Tolan, this real-life judge. Do y'all remember that? Her daughter-in-law went into the hospital. She's on TV, real-life judge. Y'all remember that?
I don't remember that one.
It was on TV. I don't know.
Is it
I'm
the
gonna go look at TV.
is it
okay?
is it the recent one with the woman that had postpartum?
Huh?
Is it the woman that had postpartum and recently had her children? Which
No. It was a judge that's a reality TV. A judge. Her son, wife went into the hospital.
Oh.
Judge Tolan.
Oh,
killed.
Judge Tolan.
You remember that?
I think I remember that.
Yeah, you remember, and she died.
Yeah, I think I remember. Oh, yeah, I don't remember the outcome, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but I
the
do
baby,
know. I
she
think she
died.
wrote a book about it, though.
Yeah, she died, and the baby lived. But it was felt like it was a neglect on the doctor's part. So what happened? Somebody just still wasn't aware of what was going on here.
I mean, it could be any of the things we discussed up here
Anything.
today, I think.
Yeah.
If they weren't listening, I mean, we don't know
Yeah.
that case, but you can imagine that it was probably really upsetting in the hospital.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I just have one question.
Okay.
With her locks, just want to say that I loved your outfit. I just wanted to ask, because you told me that you're biracial. How did you feel growing up in your community? Like, have you felt like within your friends and your community that you were on one side but not the other, or you didn't give enough support to one side? How did you feel genuinely deep down, and what impact did that make towards the community?
Ooh, I love that question.
That's a great question.
So I think one of the biggest things, and I know I mentioned it earlier, is that my life was like a racial relay. It was,
Ping pong.
yeah, and it really was, because it was one of those things where I had my family at home saying, this is your identity, be proud of it. You know, you have you have interracial family. Be happy. It's okay to say that you're white and black. But then I had, in a rural community, from a teacher when I first started school that didn't want to take the effort to even pronounce my name Ronnie and say rotten egg and deem that as a nickname, right?
you.
But then you also have folks that when we had standardized testing, when they marked my race as black, and I'm like, oh no, I'm biracial. They're like, well, there's not an option for that. So one drop rule, you're black. So there was a struggle.
We all black.
Right.
But anyway,
Right.
we'll get to that later. That's a whole nother history.
And so it was one of
wasn't
those
gonna go there,
things-
We're gonna do that.
Yeah. So it was one of those things that because of the morals and the confidence in the work that my parents have instilled in me, that I did not see myself friends with one side more than the next or leaning one way more than the other, because I embraced all, because I celebrated all. It's the societal impacts that showed me that I needed to navigate certain systems differently, because look, I'm hyper yellow, like I am super light skinned. So there's certain environments where I am not black enough for the black side or white enough for the white side, right? And so you have your different pockets of how you're viewed. But I think if I was not as confident in my own identity, then I would have had more of that flux one way or the other. However, it wasn't until I really hit college, when I was outside of my rural community, that I realized that I could just be me. But I learned that I had to be an advocate for those who didn't think they had their voice way earlier than I really needed to. So I think I use it as a privilege. I'll admit it. I use it as a privilege because I know I have a voice in spaces that others don't. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like my experience is same as yours or same as yours. Like I know that my experience was very different. And I think that just understanding that and me being open to hearing other people's perspectives allowed me to grow and be more informed to help advocate the way that others needed that advocacy. So hopefully that answered it.
Yeah, thank
no
you.
problem.
Thank you for that question, too.
No problem.
Well, it is Black Maternal Health Week. I just hope this serves as a reminder that this is a conversation we need to be having every day, of every month, of every year, if we really want to see progress happen. So I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. Put your hands together for Stephanie Crawford, Ramon Downey-Leonard, Ronnie Jenkins, and Rashawn Reed. Thanks, guys.
And thank you as
Yes,
moderator.
yes, awesome moderator.
You pulled it out of us.
I forgot that this thing wasn't here. So I'm sure you all agree that we just experienced an incredibly powerful and motivational conversation. I want to give not only our panelists, but also our amazing moderator one more round of applause. And I hope you all are carrying the impact of this conversation in a positive, powerful way, ready to help us all change our city, our community, and the world. And when we talked about envisioning this dialogue, it became very important to Room to Grow, and to me in particular, to represent as wide a variety as we could in which ways Black families have traveled on the road to parenthood, to building their families. I've shared with some Room to Grow staff that I never heard the term lost mama until I became one. And so for those of you here today, either joining us online because we are streaming, or in the room who consider yourselves a part of the Black community, if and however you have engaged in the parenthood journey, I hope that you in some way, shape, or form felt seen or heard by the conversation that we had today. The challenge and the part of the journey that we tackle at Room to Grow is significant. The fact is that even those young ones who successfully make it past the barriers placed against their caregivers during pregnancy and delivery if those children are also born into low-income circumstances, and nearly half of America's babies are, without intervention, young ones and their families will face an uphill battle to overcome additional opportunity gaps, which statistically will lead to further challenges in school, and then at work, and then long-term life. Today, we partner with just about 400 families in Boston, hundreds more in New York, and yet there are still so many more who could benefit from this type of support. And we are ready to do more. We believe that now is the time to deepen our impact, to prepare for future growth, and to take bold steps forward towards our vision, our dream, that one day all families will have the resources they need to raise their children to achieve the dreams they set together. And if you are ready to join us, and I hope you all are, in making this collective impact, there are many ways that you can do so, some of which we just talked about here. If you haven't made a donation yet of either financial resources or inventory, because we do give our families lots of things that you see here displayed today. So, and a lot of that happens because of generous community members like you donating books and cute shoes and outfits and safety equipment, etc. If you haven't done that today and you want to, through our website, we've made it easy to do either one of those things. There's lots of room to grow staff here with electronic devices if you want to do that before you leave today. You may have also received a postcard directing you to the event page for our May benefit. We're really excited about that happening at the end of May. We are live selling tickets. We're also still inviting people to join the event committee. So if you're interested in either one of those things, please make sure you grab a postcard from one of our Room to Grow staff members today. And on behalf of all of our Room to Grow families, our team, our leadership council, and our wonderful panelists and moderator today, and our entire community, thank you for spending your afternoon with us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Wonderful. Oh, get on the mic before I say something.
Yeah, that's
I know, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm like, oh,
Turn it off.